Right, we are moving swiftly to our first panel, Reimagining Multilateralism and Bridging the Implementation Gap. Stockholm plus 50, of course, brings us pretty much full circle from 1972. 50 years on, it's evident the world is not on track to meet any of the environmental goals. So Bob Watson, former chair of the International Panel on Ecosystems and Biodiversity and lead author of the iconic UN report, Making Peace with Nature, I think says it best.
The world is not on course to achieve any of the environmental goals. While some progress has been made to conserve and restore biodiversity, none of the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets were fully met. And with the current pledges to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the world is not on a pathway to meet the Paris target of limiting warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius, but on a pathway to 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. Climate change, loss of biodiversity and pollution are three interconnected issues that threaten achieving any of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and hence threaten human well-being for current and future generations. Each of these environmental issues is also an economic, development, security, social, moral and ethical issue and adversely affects all people, rich and poor, but mostly the poorest people in the poorest countries.
So Bob, who really truly doesn't mince his words, we've got a lot to talk about. We need to reimagine systems, the lessons learned those past decades, and what it will take to move forward. He can't stop either. Let me welcome my panel for this session and invite them to the stage. Bear with us as they come up. Sebastian Treyer is director of IDRI. He's going to be joining us remotely. Professor Maria Ivanova, a global governance expert, please come on up. Astrid Schomaker, director of global sustainable development at the European Commission. Alain Leroy, former UN Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations and representative of the French Association of France. Stephen Kukoda, Executive Director of the International Copper Association. Dr. Bao Yang, Secretary General of the Sea Foundation, which represents the top 900 businesses in China. And Dominic Rore, he's going to be remote, by the way, as is Dominic Rore, Senior Advisor to the CEO at the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. And we'll start with a bigger picture, and then we'll get to the industry and the corporate, this private sector in just a second. We convene this session in cooperation with the French Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations, IDRI, and Sebastian Treyer is from IDRI and joins us now. Sebastian, IDRI has undertaken extensive research and consultations on the subject of the performance of the multilateral system. How in peril would you say is this system now? Are we ready for a new iteration, as it were?
Thank you very much, and I'm really sorry not to be able to be with you today in Stockholm for personal reasons. I think the first statements I need to make is that the rules-based order is being very explicitly shaken and threatened by powerful players, including by major powers and major national governments. And this is really one of the key perils that we see in the period. And this comes at a time when, beyond respecting the rules-based order, we actually need always more institutions for a more efficient and a fairer cooperation framework. So the rules are shaken, but on top of them, we actually would need to build even more cooperation capacities. I want to raise a third element of context, that is, we have a big issue of trust about the solidarity claims of the major economic powers of the world. If you listen to what I would call the non-aligned countries that say that they do not trust anymore the promises made by the G7 countries. And that goes beyond, I think we should not forget that, and we should look beyond the systemic rivalry between the US and China or between different countries. So this is the context, and in this context, we organized this conference last October where we discussed the questions of justice and effectiveness and efficiency of the multilateral system. I want to make one general statement and ask 5 questions. The general statement is that the multilateral system as it is is considered by many of the academics and the stakeholders that we have interviewed, is considered inefficient and not fair enough. But all these players and many countries stick to it because it's the best that we have. And reforming all these institutions would take a lot of time, while we actually do not have that time. Urgent action is absolutely necessary. And this multilateral system as it is has given us the most legitimate framework for sustainable development with the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement, all the deals that were decided in 2015. On top of that, of course, this multilateral system is always considered very necessary for the new crises that emerge, the pandemics, the food security and energy security crisis that we see with the war that is occurring now in Ukraine. And we've seen that at the UN Assembly for the environment. So yes, we need it, even if it's inefficient and not fair enough. 5 questions now. My first question is around the fact that we are seeing more negotiation opened on the environment, as if, and I would question, is the environment just an excuse for having only technical dialogues? Well, actually, the political channel is just conflictual. So do we just talk about environment in order to have continued dialogue? And I would say no to that question, because the transformation to the net zero economy is already at the heart of the geopolitics of today, and we need to really discuss the environment because it's at the heart of the conflicts of today. My second question is, in order to accelerate action, we see lots of proposals about plurilateral rather than multilateral action. And I think that's good because we see pluri-stakeholder public-private partnerships, for instance, on green steel, that are really unlocking transformation in many continents. Yep. But of course, we first need to make them work and ensure they are brought back for fairness reasons into the multilateral framework. I still have 3 points, but I hear that you might want to interrupt me.
Yeah,
so.
well, I just wanted to hurry you a little bit. We've got a pretty full panel here. Go very quickly, tell us what the next 3 questions are.
Thank you so much. I'll go very quickly.
Very quick.
The third one is that one of the key questions beyond the idea of the G7 countries need to fulfill their promises in terms of financing, climate financing, sustainable development, is that we have a claim that the international economic order is structurally asymmetrical. We see the divide increasing between the middle income and least developed countries with regard to the others. And in that regard, we need to really look at how this can be dealt with in the net zero economy of tomorrow. My fourth point is that, of course, we need not only to look at government-to-government discussions, but look really at the fact that transnational companies, the transboundary action of civil society is becoming extremely important. And we need to look at the fact that the more space for political space for civil society and businesses is actually good for the implementation of sustainable development. And my last point is about the securitization. A lot of the lens that we now have because of the wars and the crisis on our issues is through the lens of security. That might be good to put sustainable development at the heart of the political, at the prime priority of the political agenda. But at the same time, we need to look at the fairness issue that could arise if we just look at this issue through at our issues through the security lens. These were my main points, and I hope that's opening up an interesting conversation.
Absolutely, Sebastian. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. It does set the context well. By the way, how could I possibly forget Harry Ferhar, Head of Global Public and Government Affairs at Signify, who is, of course, another member of this panel and will be talking to the corporate bit, the private sector bit in just a moment. Welcome to you, Harry. Apologies for not bringing you in at the top. Maria, let me come to you next. If you, grab that microphone. In fact, all of you on the stage, grab the mic when you're speaking. I want to come back to the role of UNEP. And I know you've got a lot to say about this. I know there's a book floating around here. I'm going to hold it up, do your PR for you. I think you've got some flyers. The Untold Story of the World's Leading Environmental Institution. Got some flyers on your desk. Has UNEP fulfilled its role successfully, would you say?
I'm going to turn this around. I'd actually like to ask the audience, has UNEP fulfilled its role successfully? Yes, raise your hand. Then the answer is no. That's
okay, what do you think?
So from the audience, we get an answer of, well, I don't know, probably. And the thing is, UNEP, as a scholar of UNEP, I have studied UNEP for the last 20 plus years over its 50-year history. UNEP has succeeded and UNEP has not succeeded. So the answer is both yes and no. What was UNEP tasked to do? What was its mission? What is its mission? Its mission is to be the catalyst, to be the conscience, to be the collaborator, to be the champion for the earth. Has it succeeded? Yes, it has catalyzed. It has catalyzed thought, it has catalyzed institutions. We have environmental ministries around the world because of the UN Environment Programme. Has it resolved problems? Yes and no. UNEP is known for its leadership in shrinking the ozone hole. But we have put so much expectation of UNEP resolving the environmental problems that we saw on the screen right now. UNEP was never charged with the mandate to resolve environmental problems because it was supposed to be the catalyst in the UN system. It has been to a certain extent, but has it catalyzed enough action to resolve the environmental problems? This is why we're here today.
In a way, we're asking the wrong question. We need to really address what role that is, and have we forgotten what its original
Axel,
role was?
why are you asking the wrong questions?
But that's the right one, right? That's the right one. Okay, so how do you see promise in a reform of the structure, a new iteration, as I said to Sebastian?
Well, that's usually the leading question to, do you want to see a World Environment Organization? And my answer is very unequivocal, no. Because we do not need a specialized agency for the environment, because they had that discussion, they had that debate 50 years ago in the lead up to this conference, to the Stockholm conference, and they said unequivocally, no, we do not need a specialized agency, we do not need a sector that would be the environment. We need a small, agile, flexible entity that would make us collaborate. And that's what UNEP was supposed to be. So do we need some reform to make it fulfill that role? Most probably. We need to make UNEP fulfill that initial role of being the catalyst, the collaborator. And I think that this is what's happening right now. And the creation of the Science Policy Business Forum is exactly that kind of push that needs to happen to enable UNEP to be a collaborator, but then we need the collaborators on the other side. Yep. So what can we catalyze through these meetings? How can we engage academia, that I'm a representative of, in these discussions, is really what's necessary today. We need more collaboration. Yep. I know that we hear a lot of what we have not done. What I would like to hear is, what can we do? Okay. What should we do? And change the narrative.
Here in this forum, business and civil society and the scientists, they get a seat at the table, but they need a seat at the other table too, I guess, and we'll come on to that in just a second. Astrid, Europe, of course, is a leader in supporting environmental multilateralism. The EU's Green Deal, I've spoken to Frans Timmermans at length about this in the past. What do you think are the biggest challenges to multilateralism in this area now, and how well is the Commission doing in trying to, I guess, sort of tread its way through this?
Thank you. Maria is always a hard act to follow, but I'll try anyway. So I think multilateralism works, and I think we'll see multilateralism prove its value, and we will see it just now when it comes under unprecedented attack. And people have referred to the geopolitical situation, so I don't have to go into detail, but it's clear there is no alternative to multilateralism, also and in particular to the environment. I think the question is then rather, do we have the right kind of multilateralism in the environment and the right governance to give us the answers we need to the issues that have been laid out, I think, to perfection by Johan Rockström earlier. And I think here the answer is a bit more ambivalent. So yes, we have a crisis of trust that we certainly have to see, trust between the global south and the global north, and it goes both ways. The north thinks the south will only act if we throw money at them, but they don't really care. And the south thinks we're not getting the money that we really deserve. So that's an issue that has deepened also when, thanks to COVID, we haven't been able to meet each other for so many years. But I really want to talk about 3 systemic challenges, just as we have a triple planetary crisis. I think we also have a triple challenge to our governance system, and that's a challenge of fragmentation, a challenge of gaps, and a challenge of lack of inclusiveness. Now, fragmentation, very clear, we all know since Stockholm, the environmental governance system has grown organically. It has grown on the basis of what we knew then. New challenges appeared. We've answered with a new MEA. We have 500 now. But they all stay in their silos. They do their little thing. We end up having multiple reports to multiple MEAs, but no institution, nobody really puts together all of these reports to one whole. So the system is fragmented and therefore doesn't deliver. It also has crucial and important and incomprehensible gaps, notably in the area of sustainable consumption and production. How can it be that the scientists tell us that it is our unsustainable consumption and production that is the main driver of the triple planetary crisis, and yet with 500 MEAs we have none that looks in a holistic manner at our consumption and production systems? Where is a convention that would look at global resource use, that would come with ideas such as sufficiency, that would give us targets for resource use? Doesn't exist. How can it be that water, one of the biggest accelerators for SDGs, one of the biggest potential factors in conflicts, doesn't have a truly global convention that helps us exchange knowledge, transfer capacity, etc. And lastly, it is a non-inclusive system for many reasons, but one I want to highlight here in particular because it's a government system. And government actors can only do so much. They certainly must do more. But where are the businesses? How can they come in? Their decisions matter. Where are the cities? Are they at the table? They're not. And I could go on. So that's my triple challenge. Now, what to do about that? I think, and this is a Science Business Forum, let's start with the science. The science as well is fragmented. We have the IPCC, the IPBES, the International Resource Panel. They all do excellent reports, but they need to do more. And we need to work also with UNEP to bring together that knowledge and to have these science give us one body of knowledge for the sort of holistic solutions that we need. So there's a science gap to fill, and then also an important work for the UN system, UNEP and UNDP, to take that science and translate it into actionable policies, especially for developing countries.
Okay, very quick follow-up. In your role at the Commission, do you have enough interaction? Is there enough collaboration with the private sector, with civil society? How much more do you want to see?
Yeah, there were enough, but much more than we used to. Environment used to talk to NGOs.
But that's still not good enough, though, is it?
It's very different. I think what has changed in the European Union is that we've come to an understanding that these environmental challenges can be turned into business opportunities. So we've managed to bring business on board, and we managed to now move to a circular economy policy that is fully supported by European companies, because companies have not only understood that they have a role as environmental stewards, surely, but also that their personal or that their success as businesses now depends on whether or not they keep depleting the natural resource base or whether they actually protect it and therefore can benefit from it.
All right. Astrid, thank you very much indeed. Alain Leroy, as former Under-Secretary General of the UN Peacekeeping, what can we do, Alain, to ensure that geopolitical conflicts don't undermine the work on sustainable development that we've seen over the past 50 years, and indeed moving forward now?
Unfortunately, I think it's unfortunately obvious that conflicts do undermine the work on sustainable development. It's absolutely obvious. Professor Rockstrom was very clear what he said about the Ukraine crisis, the Ukraine war today. We see lots of huge destructions from infrastructures, buildings, factories, including chemical factories, return to coal production in some countries. So the impact of conflict, it's obvious. There is no dispute on that. It's obvious. So the main question is how to reduce, with more multilateralism, the number and intensity of conflicts, because we know they have a huge impact. And for that, I would say the tracks that we are collectively we are working on is first to say, I would say, to work more with regional organizations. For example, the role that the European Union has done since its creation to reduce and to stop any kind of conflict on its soil is an example. And we are glad to see that other organizations are stepping up, getting more and more strength to prevent conflicts. The work as the African Union is doing, strengthening the work of regional African organizations like ECOWAS or SADC or East African Community to reduce the number of conflict and to reduce the intensity is quite important. but remain, of course, the key actor, which is the UN Security Council. I remind everyone, Article 24 of the Charter, the UN Security Council has a primary responsibility for peace, for international peace and security. And we all know that the UN Security played a very important role, and these days, and recently for some years, he has been preventing to be in his role. And the key point there is the veto right. The veto right is, when we say reimagining multilateralism, one of the key points is how to reduce the number of veto for blocking the multilateral system at its right. And I remind here the figures about the veto right. I checked, and you can see that on the internet. Since 1945, for example, the Soviet Union and then Russia have used it 157 times, and including 30 times in 1991. The US have used it 87 times, the veto right, and 17 times since 91. China has used it 19 times and 16 times since 91. The UK has used it 30 times and 0 times since 91. And France has used it 18 times and 0 since 91. The last time UK and France used it was in 1989, so 33 years ago. So the key point is now to reduce this high level of veto rights. And for that, it's very difficult. I'm not that optimistic, but there has been some tentative to use it. One was done by Mexico and France to try to have an auto-limitation by the permanent members to use it and to reserve it to only a case of mass atrocities or war crimes. There has been more than 105 countries who are supporting this initiative to prevent, of course, a new multilateralism. But still, I would say US, Russia, and China has not accepted it. Second, I would say in these coming days, you have seen that on 26 April 22, so 2 weeks ago, 1 month ago, on the proposal of Liechtenstein, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution, again, on 26 April 22, forcing to have a debate in the General Assembly within 10 days after one permanent member has used his veto right. Mm-hmm. And we will see that by the end of this week, will be called a debate for the first time on General Assembly, forcing those who have used the veto rights to explain their reason. And there has been, maybe you have seen, there has been a proposal resolution in Security Council 4 days ago. It was on North Korea. There was a veto by China and Russia. Yep. And so both will have to explain their position by the end, general debate, by the end of this week in New York to see, to explain their position. Again, I'm sure that will not stop the veto right, but probably that will reduce the number of use of it.
Yep. Okay. Sorry. Were you going to add one other thing?
Yeah. Yes.
Please.
No.
Then
finish
of course. Up, and then we'll move.
Yeah. No. Just yep. Then I want to rebound on your question on UNEP.
Yep.
Remind also that in the past there has been a proposal again by France, by President Chirac, to have what we called a World Environment Organization to give more constitutive power to UNEP or executive power. That's of course. That has not been successful, including Brazil, who was not in favor, of course. But that's something we still have in mind. Mm. And then maybe the last point on this is how to reimagine multilateralism when there is so many difficulties within the existing system. But as Sebastian Streyer said, we don't see any other than the UN there. But we launched, Germany, France, and others launched the Alliance for Multilateralism. And there where it was launched in April 2019, and we have many, in some more than 100 countries participating on that. But the key point is to say, first, the existing organizations are sometimes blocked. Second, the importance is not only the state actors, but also the non-state actors. So Alliance for Multilateralism on different fields, on cyberspace, on humanitarian law, yep. on climate and security, to gather so states, business, scientists, civil society representative, and we work on that on many fields, and I think it's a track. I can develop more, but it's a track I think it's important for the future.
Okay, Alain, Leroy, thank you. I mean, it's fascinating to get that perspective into this discussion, so thank you very much indeed for that. Right, I mean, rarely do we hear sort of outside of forums like this, a private sector perspective on environmental multilateralism. So let's do that now. We've got 3 leaders with us. Harry Fahar, as I said, from Signify. Let me kick it off with you. Basic question, and I asked this to Astrid. Does industry have a proper place, Harry, a proper chair at the table in the current multilateral system?
Well, I would say actually then, and I think we all know her, because the logic fits in a nutshell, that innovation is key in addressing all these challenges, because then most innovations are helped there by Mother Nature. They're more resource efficient, they're cheaper during their lifetime, and they provide a better quality of service. We know that very well from LED lighting. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, then we've been in a society that has been, in a way, a survival of the fittest model. So who is most successful in selling and owning more stuff is successful. And some people, and they win, and other people lose. But I think if you also look at it, then win-lose, and certainly with the challenges we face today, always turns into lose-lose. So we need to move from a model of, let's say, survival of the fittest to becoming fittest for survival. With the SDGs as our dashboard. And what we know from the lighting sector, where we're going through massive change, and I'll say a few more things about it tomorrow, so I'll spare it now, then there are a number of SDGs that are actually also our dashboard as a company. So SDG 7, not surprisingly, sustainable energy. So efficiency needs to do half of keeping us within that 1.5 C boundary. Also then we're moving massively to renewables. And actually there we see, when you talk about developing economies or in a way about new infrastructure, we can leapfrog to solar LED lighting, so zero energy. But also access, the same thing. As much as for many of us, our grandparents and great-grandparents got access to electricity, and certainly mine did, my grandparents, then yeah, that's when socio-economic development started spiraling. If you then look at SDG 11, I only have two more, so 11 on cities, yeah, about half of the energy bill is public lighting, and we can reduce that by 80%, and at the same time, we see examples where the better lighting reduces traffic accidents, nighttime traffic accidents by 30%, so really true, and also street crime by 21. And then the last one, yeah, climate, I already mentioned, SDG 13, so where we massively are contributing to, yeah, to efficiency, to mitigation.
Yeah. Do you, I guess, you know, back to my initial question about your role at the table, the private sector. Do you want a bigger role at the table?
No, absolutely. I think we all need to work together. So that is also what multilateralism is about.
That's the diplomatic answer. But what are you know, if it is desirable, what are the safeguards?
Well, we do see now in many cases that political development is more hesitant, more cautious. Maybe for part they're listening too much to the ones that have vested interest, or they think that things are not possible. So we want to step on the gas, so we want to accelerate. So virtually anything we need to do, efficiency, renewables, you name it, we need to double the speed of action. A big one is then accelerating renovation of infrastructure. And fortunately, a lot of that is in the European Green Deal and also in the American Investment, Infrastructure Investment Act, and also in the Chinese 14th five-year plan. So that is also why I would urge everybody to act. So we build our own program. You can see it online in Europe called Green Switch. So we're actually on all the 5 pillars of the Green Deal we act. In the US, we call it Brighten America because green is a bit inflated as a term, but essentially it does the same thing. And in China, it will be shortly launched. So when the lockdown is relieved, also Green Switch China. So actually to see and to work with the, let's say, the local governments, because that's where the action is, the cities and municipalities, to really do the things that need to be done.
Yeah, okay, good. Harry, thank you very much indeed. Steve Kokoda from the International Copper Association. How, and you know, we touched on this a little bit, how can the system, the multilateral system, create a more powerful, I guess, dynamic for the adoption of the best, the most sustainable technologies? What do you want to see?
Thanks for that. And I think Harry, started off the discussion really well about why industry needs a seat at the table. And I've been personally in this space for about 10 years, and I was reflecting on that leading up to this discussion and how much, I'd say, things have changed in 10 years. I'd say 10 years ago, we had to fight a bit to get that seat at the table, and now it's more inclusive, and we're being asked to take part in the discussion, so we're grateful for that. I think the challenge for us is where sometimes governments maybe don't take as balanced a view at industries like mine as they could. You know, we're really providing the building blocks for decarbonization and for a clean energy transition. You know, there is no clean energy transition without copper, right? So a message we'd like to get across here is that the views of of industries like mine just needs to be a bit more balanced in terms of governments. But to achieve that, we need to bring our own credentials to the table to show that we're making a positive impact. We're here celebrating Stockholm Plus 50, and next year the International Copper Association will be celebrating 25 years of partnership with the UN system. We're very proud of that. I don't know if there's another metal or material so closely ingrained with this system in particular, and we are grateful for that. It was inspiring to hear the comments from the president of ECOSOC. You know, we're like Harry's group, you know, I'd say we're one of the leaders on SDG 7, the energy goal, and I would say it's SDG 7 that underpins all 17 of the SDGs, right? I've heard it described as the golden thread. And we build partnerships to accelerate SDG 7. You know, along with Harry, we're part of an initiative called United for Efficiency, or U4E, that's transforming the developing world towards energy efficient appliances, lighting, industrial equipment. You know, we launched an initiative at COP26 called CORE, Cornerstone of Rural Electrification, that's ensuring that we're achieving universal access, but not access for the sake of access, that is being done sustainably. And just 2 weeks ago today, we were in Kigali, and we launched an initiative called GEAR that's helping to make Africa's grids more resilient and efficient. And I would say that the energy programs make an impact on at least 10 of the SDGs. I'll just make a final point, Axel, I see you there.
In fact, before you do that, and maybe you can wrap this into this question, you know, since we last met, you know, I talked at the beginning about how often we've convened this forum. We met 3 years ago in Nairobi, we met a year before that as well. You've mentioned some progress, but what are you most heartened by in terms of the progress that we're talking about here, in terms of pushing that seat up to the table, in terms of getting your voice heard?
Yeah, you asked the earlier speakers about the glass half full or glass half empty. You know, I'd say for me that, you know, I struggled a bit during the lockdown, and COP26 seems like the world was going to open up again, right? And then Omicron said, wait, not so fast, right? But, you know, I saw an optimism there. I mean, there was just this energy that permeated the venue, and it felt like people went away for 2 years and they came in with fresh ideas. I mean, I had a conversation with a taxi cab driver who said he was disheartened listening to government leaders talk about climate. And I said, well, you kind of need to go, you know, below that level. They need to say what they need to do, their political reasons, understand and believe that there are organizations, there are partnerships that are out there that are committed to climate, that are committed to the SDGs.
Are they getting their voices heard, though?
I think more so than ever. I think, look, when it comes to industry, there could always be more. I'll just end with a point. You know, I said a more balanced view of industries like mine. You know, I said already, you know, we're providing the building blocks for decarbonization, the clean energy transition. And governments speak out of both sides of their mouths. They want to see these advancements, and then they say, no, you know, extractors, mining, it's bad. We need to do less of that. And I get it. We don't have the greatest track record. But, you know, you have, let's say in the United States, as one example, and my final point, a viable project that's 12 years in permitting without a shovel in the ground. You have an administration that wants to achieve a clean energy transition, and yet a project there is languishing, right? So I think just to have that more balanced perspective that we need to do our bits to, you know, to clean our house. I'll talk about that more tomorrow, but we have an important role to play.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Biao Yang, Secretary General of the Sea Foundation, you of course represent, I think, 900 businesses in China. What do you think needs to change to allow for a greater success, greater impact in bridging the SDGs implementation gaps? What do you want to see? How heartened are you by progress?
Okay, thank you. And yeah, first I would like to thank you, SBB, invited me to share the industry insight on this session. I'm sorry, I'm poor English, but I'll try my best to introduce some about my thinking. I'm not sure everyone knows the Sea Foundation is founded by the Society of Entrepreneurs and Ecology in 2008. Sea Foundation was established with the mission of supporting Chinese environmental society, organization, and facilitate a plan for entrepreneurs, NGO, and the public engaged in environmental protection and sustainable development. So we work on the different strategies, such as desert certification prevention, climate change, business, sustainable and biodiversity conservation, marine conservation, as well as scaling up challenges in environmental NGO sector. So now we have more than 900 entrepreneurs donors to share views from the private sector perspective. Since the beginning of China's reform and opening in 1980s, China has been active, engaged in global governance and follow the most important green policy are economic transformation and climate change. China is rebalancing and transforming its economy towards a green, local carbon, and a circular one. And with regard to climate change, China has pledged to reach carbon pink by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2030. Now, China's national carbon emission trade system is now in full operation, covering 2,162 companies in the power generation sector and account for about 40% China's total carbon emission. So based on this, the Safe Foundation have conducted two important projects. One is our green supply chain action in real estate industry. We launched this work in cooperation with other partners in 2016 with the technical assistance of consultants and third-party supervision from NGO. 100 property developers in China have joined the action to implement green procurement by exerting leverage on their upstream suppliers to enhance environmental regulatory compliance and performance. And the initiative have developed the environmental standard for 13 categories of building materials created by white list, green list, and black list in each category. The committed real estate developers have purchased building materials only from the companies that white and green list. Currently, there are 3,874 suppliers on white list and 22 suppliers on green list. The overall scale of green procurement that have increased from 1,500 million in 2017 to 2.54 billion in 2021. The second one is the scale of climate change work by engaged with multiple stakeholders. Now we have support more than 30 partners, including government, academia, NGOs, and social startups. Last year, we have conducted the first blue carbon trade in China. So forward, Safe Foundation will continue to engage the entrepreneurs, NGO, and the public environmental conservation. We will keep going on, provide a platform where the private sectors, civil society, governments, and academia, and the local communities and the public work together to prevent the plant and the nature. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Yang. And Dominic, Rory, I want to bring you in to finish up here, and then I'm going to throw it out to our audience. Again, I've asked the question about the place at the table in the current multilateral system. Be interested to get your views, Dominic, first on that. And then a bigger question, and something we're going to get onto more in the next session, whether the whole economic system, whether capitalism itself needs to be reinvented to support the achievement of environmental targets. So 2 big questions to you, Dominic.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here. I'm sorry I'm not there in person to join you. It's an excellent conversation. I'd say there's a couple of things that are coming through which I think will help to answer your question. The first is that we have an enormous problem, and we heard from the science. We know kind of what the problem is and why we need to tackle this pretty quickly. It's sharper than ever before. We've heard some excellent interventions from companies like Signify. You have others who are part of your partnership like Amazon and Volvo and Google and IBM and many others who are all doing amazing things. We heard at Glasgow, the COP, that actually there's many of these company initiatives, there's many collaborations, working in partnership with others. There's lots going on, but what we haven't cracked is how we make this happen fast and at scale. And that takes us back to the international community, because there's a lot of great work going on from the corporate side, from businesses across value chains, in collaborations, tackling key problems. We heard from Harry there on some. But again and again, harmonizing standards, creating common definitions, making circularity work at scale across borders so that secondary materials can be transported smoothly, unlocking finance through an asset class that defines circularity. There's all sorts of quite boring things which are the bread and butter of what a multilateral system can do if it were geared to providing unlocks and unblocks for the business and innovation and entrepreneurial community to tackle these problems at scale in partnership and in collaboration with governments. Montreal Protocol, which tackled the ozone layer, is a pretty good example of that, where there was a pressing need at a global level where governments negotiated with business and scientists on how best to fix that. I think that was cited earlier as one of the examples that really worked. So we're at that stage now, as Johan rightly said, that we have a global commons challenge which really needs urgent action. And we know that there's innovation and technology and financing and value chains at scale that can be transformed to fix it. So it's up to us to resharpen the tools of what that kind of applied multilateralism can look like to create those common standards and tariffs. $178 billion was used in aid in total last year, just 178 billion. That's all there is in the international public sector pot to do this. And that's going to COVID, and now that's going to tackling the challenges of food and energy from the war in Ukraine. So it has to involve a much bigger picture than that. And that's what, if I can close here, the Secretariat of the Stockholm Conference have asked the WBCSD to do, to mobilize about 70 businesses into analysis to come up with 3 big ideas across key value chains. The first is very much around tackling skills and capacity building. You heard that a bit earlier, but the muscle within the corporate sector to engage more in these collaborations with the public sector and reach out and do things across value chains. The second is very much about circularity. We heard that referred to from our colleague from the European Commission. If we had a global circularity protocol that got rid of those roadblocks across trade issues, harmonized standards, creating common definitions, you could unlock an awful lot of value, which our great companies here and elsewhere could make work. And the third is about accountability and transparency. If you try now to go onto the internet and figure out, so all those things that happened in Paris from business, how are they performing against what the science-based targets are? How are we doing against the dashboard of tackling climate change? It's quite hard to find that. So an international mechanism that provides accountability and transparency that adds up all of those business commitments on tackling, for example, climate change, but could also be pollution, impacts on nature, and makes it easy for everyone to understand and illustrates transparently what the great businesses are doing. Those are the 3 things that the Stockholm Secretariat asked us to do, and that's what will be launched on June 2nd. That is a recipe for practical multilateralism. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And look, Dominic, you talked, and I'd like to throw this out to anyone, maybe Maria, and I'll bring it out to our audience in just a second. Maybe, Maria, you want to say something like this. Dominic talked about, yes, conversations are happening, but we're not focusing enough on, how we can make this happen. Maybe first, and I guess this is what Dominic was hinting at, there needs to be this recognition that we can't make it happen the way we're trying to make it happen now, right? And it comes back to, some of the initial questions and points that you were making. We need to change the way. Are you okay? Yeah. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but can we? Yeah.
Excuse me. To make things happen differently, we have to think differently. And so I've heard everybody's contribution today is, yes, we're doing things, but we need to do them better, we need to do them faster, and we need to do them at scale. This is, excuse me.
No, sorry. Look, do you want to Harry, why don't you take this here? And I came to you at the wrong time. Sorry, Maria. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just a few comments. So we are in a rush, not only in this panel, as you observe, but also in tackling all these challenges. And I think therefore it's really important how we spend our time. And I believe, and I think Cherie knows, I believe in what I call the 10-20-70 rule. We should spend 10% of our time on inspiration, so what needs to be done and why. 20% of our time on aspiration, how much, by when and who, but 70% of our time we should spend on perspiration, rolling up our sleeves and getting the job done. So we are carbon neutral since 2020, a commitment we made in Paris in 2015. And I have to throw a little thing back at Dominic, because last week I was at the WEF in Davos with our CEO. And a couple of years ago, we also had the discussion, and Dominic knows, about then helping the WEF to become really more sustainable, carbon neutral. And we made a pitch, not surprisingly, on changing their lighting. And this turned out to be so complicated that 3 years ago we donated the lighting for the Congress Center. Well, surprise, surprise, last week we were there in a meeting with the WEF staff and in a redecorated room. And to our surprise, there was halogen in the ceiling, which is already banned a couple of years by the European Union. It uses 20 times more energy than LED lighting. And also some of the meeting rooms, there was fluorescent lighting, which will be banned in Europe next year, and hopefully in Africa soon. We're in discussion on the Minamata Treaty. So what I'm saying is that I'm not saying something here to be nasty, but I'm saying here that everybody believes that complexity is unique, so then refrains from acting from the perspiration part. I can tell you it's hard work, so we've done a lot of work across our company with our suppliers and everyone, but this is what we need to do. And you'll learn from that to fine-tune policies. We've had the same discussion with the European Commission on the Green Deal, and they included a 2030 goal for the European Commission to be carbon neutral by 2030. We can't wait for 2050. We need to tackle this action agenda. We should walk, let's say, we should not think that our complexity is unique so we can move fast. So the time to act is now. Yeah. And this is the rush that I'm alluding to.
And Steve, I won't ask who has the copper wiring contract for the World Economic Forum. Not that you know, but all right. No, I'm gonna throw it out to our audience. We've got a number of youth delegates in our midst today. In fact, we heard from one of them in an earlier session. We're going to hear a very short, it's got to be very short, we're running a little bit late on time, a short intervention from Prisha Kumar. Prisha, are you there? Yeah, go ahead. Can we get a microphone down here?
Hello?
Yep.
Am I audible? Yeah. Dear panelists and distinguished participants, I am Prisha Kumar from the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Working Group. We know from the IPC report that we have to work faster than anticipated, and every 1 second and every 0.1 of a degree counts. This event should showcase what collaboration between science, policy, and business can achieve if replicated and scaled. The work which begins here at Stockholm needs to be to help drive multilateralism and strengthen partnerships across parties and stakeholders, and align efforts and energy to deliver time-critical change. Let SPBF and Stockholm Plus 50 leave an impact which children and youth can take pride on and build on. We must use this disruption in multilateralism and various other sectors caused by the pandemic as an opportunity to build back more sustainable and more equitable with a conscious focus on the environment. Thank you very much for making space for youth at this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Prisha. We need policymakers to hear these conversations, right? We desperately need policymakers to hear the conversations that we're having on this stage today, to Prisha's point, right? Are you hopeful that they're gonna hear them and they're going to act on them? No one want to?
Since I have the microphone, I mean, yes, I think because it's so unavoidable. I mean, for a long time it was quite possible to look the other way. That's no longer the case. I would just say, in addition to what you've laid out and the concerns that have been made very clear about the planetary crisis, what we need to come forward with a bit more is also a positive vision for everybody to rally around. We cannot constantly just worry about our future, much as it is worrying, but we need to come to an idea of an economy which centers on the well-being of people, where everybody has their space, where there is a new sort of global paradigm of solidarity. And I think that's still a bit missing, that we come to this collective, more positive vision and then align our steps with it. Yep. And I think we've tried this in the European Union a little bit with the European Green Deal, but there's still way to go.
Okay. Go ahead, Maria.
This is exactly the point that I've been trying to get across. We need a positive vision. We're not going to be only scared into action. We have to be inspired into action. What inspires us? Youth inspires us. Youth also forces us to act. But what does to act mean? I would like to rethink environmental multilateralism by looking at the states that are acting. And the president of ECOSOC was noting how the member states are acting. You also noted you were in Kigali. We have a project on reimagining environmental multilateralism with a focus on small states. And I would say, look at Rwanda. What Rwanda is doing as a small state, and the definition of a small state is not only small in population, in territory, but those that punch above their weight. And I think this is where UNEP has the platform to bring countries, institutions, citizens together and to get them to tell their stories of how they punch above their weight. Then we'll be inspired into action, and that's what takes things into scale.
Yep. Yep, go ahead, Steve. Who has the most inspiring stories as far as you're concerned?
Say again?
Who has the most inspiring stories as far as you're concerned? Who should we be listening to?
Oh, my goodness. I
Don't worry.
Well, no, I mean, the policy question is an important one, right? So, and I wanted to maybe get specific on that. And Harry inadvertently led me to make this comment. You know, he talked about energy efficiency being half of the Paris Agreement, right? Well, you know, if you look at a map of the policies on energy efficiency standards here, the European Union, as he said, good policies on lighting. When you get to the developing world countries, you see almost nothing, right? So, you know, you've got the potential for 1 billion air conditioners, 1 billion refrigerators to be sold in the next 2 decades with absolutely no standards against them. That alone would set the Paris Agreement past the tipping point. So policymakers, I think, need to embrace the existing technologies, right? We shouldn't be waiting. There should always be innovation, but we can't wait, and we may have to make do with what we have, right? So there's a lot more on the policy side that could be done to make advancements, particularly against climate.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Yeah, Shireen, go ahead very quickly, and then I'll take a question there, and then we're going to have to move on. Can we get a mic down here? Thanks.
Thank you. It's maybe a question for everybody, but I will especially raise that with you know, with Steve, with Harry, with Dominique, and then would love to hear you know, from the rest of the panel their thoughts, and maybe from the audience. One of the points we keep making over and over is the fact that the technologies are there largely that could help the planet. But do we have the policies to empower and finance the use of these technologies at scale? So I really would like to hear your honest answer about that.
I'll pass it to Harry in a second. I think the financing is the biggest barrier of all. You know, there's just a disconnect between the finance community and the actions that need to be done. And I think it's because, you know, I spoke about just some of the partnerships we're involved in. There's a lot more out there. You know, we're not finance people. I don't think we're all speaking the same language, right? So, you know, to really achieve scale, there needs to be innovation on the financing side. On energy efficiency, it's between 3 and 10x, depending on who you talk to, if we're going to meet the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, maybe just a few words on that. So there are lots of policies, but I think public procurement is a crucial one, because it's really still geared at the lowest initial cost. And we know over lifetime that's really impactful in a negative way. So if we go to more, you would say performance-based or green procurement, I think maybe we should coin the term circular procurement, so you look at the whole life cycle impact. I think we as a company, but also the Corporate Association and many other businesses, we're also moving from business models that are moving away from invoicing hardware to leasing the service. So we can work with cities and with companies in leasing lighting as a service, so you pay per use, like we're also accustomed to many of us with a car, because in the end, if you cannot afford energy saving, you cannot afford the energy. And energy efficiency is the only form of energy that's for free. So it's not about financing, but about finding the business models. And I think also there, it's a chicken and the egg. Once you have the policy, and we see some hesitance there, but I'm convinced, and we see that once you have the policy on circular procurement, on life cycle perspective, that will force the financing. And I think lots of banks and financial institutions, but also companies, they would be really keen to do this because it's a new way of doing business. It will accelerate innovation and it will accelerate mitigation, hopefully to this doubling rates that we very much need.
Okay, good. Dominic, I don't know if you want to have have you got a quick response to that question? If not, don't worry.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's like a sort of how-to policy set. GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, it's like over $20 trillion to spend in these net zero spaces. It's like a plumbing issue between getting that money channeled at scale into those things that we heard, which are quite good. So actually, the enabling environment at scale, so it goes across different countries on harmonized standards, tariffs, definitions, what is a circular economy asset class for asset managers to put their money into, for example, how does trade get enabled to allow secondary materials to flow across borders, for example, will unlock a lot of that value and financing and scale project. So it's almost like a real effort on the how-to policy set to get rid of some of these roadblocks that we're hearing from our business contributors here. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Dominic. Look, I've got a very wary eye on the time. I want to take that question there, and then a quick one here. Make them tight if you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is Mohammed Raouf, co-chair of major groups at UNIP. I think one of the important remarks made by the panel is the inclusiveness, lack of inclusiveness. And I think if we want to achieve our global goals, that we need to find better ways to engage major groups, different major groups, including children, youth science, business associations, and so on. By the way, major groups' involvement in UNIP is one of the best, but on global level, we have seen a shrinking space for major groups. And of course, major groups can help achieve these global goals with governments. We have seen the government doing the work in the last 50 years. So maybe we need a systematic change in order to find better entry ways for major groups. We have difficulties, especially in developing worlds, and different governments think major groups and civil society are against them. So maybe you can give your ideas about how we can improve and create better engagement and entry points for major groups. Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Maria, do you want to say something on that? Yes. Inclusivity, engagement?
I will, because I actually have a PhD student in the audience who studies exactly that question, comparing major groups, children and youth engagement in UNEP and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And so Olga will give us the answer in a few years because she's writing a dissertation about it. But it's a really good question, and this is the space for that kind of research. But if I were to answer your question quickly, and Olga will correct me in a few years, I will say that UNEP has to do its job better. You said UNEP is the better engager of major groups, and I would actually say no, it's not good enough. This is to your first question, Axel, of has it done its job? UNEP has to be better in engaging major groups, and it has to raise their voice. And I want to re-echo what Astrid said about that positive story. UNEP has the power to bring positive stories together. And I want to put a challenge out to UNEP. Inspire us to action. How do we inspire business to action? How do we inspire government to action? How do we inspire academia, the knowledge sector, and all the different major groups?
Okay, there's the title of the next forum.
No, just a quick word on comment, maybe on the previous question on the role of the youth and all that. How it works, I would say, in democracy, I will give the example of European Union. There has been strong push by young population, now commitments by EU, carbon neutrality 2050, Fit for 55, so 55% reduction by greenhouse gas by 2030. And now the role of the mission groups and the youth is to ensure that these commitments are implemented. And we had in France a presidential election really recently. That was key. The young population pushed very much for that. That is exactly how it will work, to find finance to implement the technologies. We need that, and the policy makers will need to be pushed as they are today. In democracy, it works. It, of course, is different in other kind of government system. But that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Very, very quick point from Tim here, and then, yeah, it's got to be quick. We're running behind, but yeah, go ahead.
Thanks very much. Excellent. Just in terms of inspiring to action, there are many, many global businesses, unlike Signify, who do not fully disclose their past emissions, nor do they have realistic forward-looking targets to decarbonize. So should part of having a seat at the table be full transparency on past emissions and having realistic targets?
Yeah. So, yeah, the stick, right? We talk about the carrot and the stick. You know, incentives, carrots, I guess. You know,
you can't
be transparent, get a seat at the table.
You can't manage, but you can't measure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good point. Let me come to the questions here. Yeah, quick one there, and then a quick one next to you as well.
Thank you. I will try to make it as quick as possible. Nina Dabashadze, I'm the representative of academia from developing country and from developed state. So my question would be of a little bit practical type of a question. What would you recommend for popularizing and for translating the policies about sustainable measures and initiatives to the wider population? So continuing your point, if the policy comes from above and not below, so if it is not the pyramid of first civil activity, then NGOs, then policymakers, what we try to do here. But if in developing countries, speaking of my own experience, it comes from above, which sector would you say has the task of translating those policies to the wider population of the state?
Okay. Anyone want to address that?
The knowledge sector.
There you go, the knowledge sector. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just a few words. I think we should do that together. We should translate our policies into things that people really understand, so make it tangible. So talk about local livelihood development. Everybody wants to build a livelihood where they are born. And when we focus on that, then it's easier to see why we do that. But also, we don't talk about efficiency or, let's say, carbon that much, a bit, but to our customer about, let's say, productivity in the workplace, safety, like I mentioned, in cities, but also then with data and statistics. So make it tangible, so that a city mayor, a household, and people really understand, okay, they get a little bit of an aha feeling, and then they know, like, okay. And that's how we then can create the majority that accelerates progress. At least that's why I'm hopeful.
Okay, and very, very quickly, I'm going to get into trouble, and you guys are going to get hungry. Yeah, very quick.
Thank you so much, Erica Key, Future Earth. There's significant investment in green innovation, including tens of millions of euros contribution by the European Commission, amongst others, in urban living labs and other scalable nature-based solutions. But there's a breakdown between those thousands of flowers that we're allowing to bloom and that procurement process that we talked about earlier. So how can we get scientists to think like mayors? And how can we get that science to move past just a pilot stage that is excellent for public intervention, but doesn't actually get put into production and maintained and integrated into a local budget? Thank you.
I don't have the answer, but that's a question I wanted to raise, and it's a little bit of what I was hinting at when I talked about lack of inclusivity, that in the fora that are supposed to find the solutions, we have either scientists talking to scientists or policymakers talking to policymakers, and never the twain shall meet. And that's something I think we need to address, and as we look at the environmental governance forms that we have now, and as we're trying to design forms that are fit for Stockholm Plus 100, I think we should move away from the current governance structures, rethink it, and come up with a more inclusive form of governance. And somebody mentioned a circular economy protocol, so that would be something bringing together the scientists that give us the reasons why we do things, with the practitioners who tell us how to do it, with the governments that can then think about the kinds of incentives that are needed to take the right action. And amongst those, and coming back to what Tim said, I think it's absolutely crucial full transparency, but to an agreed set of metrics. So carbon accounting is great, but we also need companies to tell us how much water do they use, how much air pollution do they create, how much other materials do they use, and all of that needs to be in a way that is globally comparable, because only then is a stick not a stick is also an incentive that actually the finance will flow to those companies whose models are sustainable and whose models can last, because they're not basically eating up the resources on which they're based.
Yeah, okay, Astrid, thank you. Yeah.
Very quickly, to make scientists think like mayors, we have to make students think like mayors, and experiential learning will be key. Second, to have scholars think like mayors, we need to ask mayors and policymakers, what questions do you have, rather than saying, here is my knowledge, understand it. We can ask, what are your questions? Then I'm going to develop the knowledge that actually answers those questions.
Okay, very good. Look, that was Reimagining Multilateralism. We've done it quickly. Sebastian, Maria, Astrid, Alain, Harry, Steve, Biao, and Dominic, thank you very much indeed for all of you for your thoughts. Thanks very much.